Hello.
Hello, hello, Stephen.
How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Fine, fine. No
How's
complaints.
things? Still staying indoor, I'm sure, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I have it just, I assume that's the way it's going to be when we get a vaccine. So I just have to keep my mind set on that. And that's all I could do. I went to Connecticut a few weeks ago to visit my sister and my brother-in-law. They have an outdoor area where the screened in porch. So you don't have to sit next to each other but you could be like outside, and not even near each other. So that worked well to visit them because they could use the company.
Is that your brother-in-law that wasn't feeling well?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
I see. So he's stopped working after that.
Oh yeah, he can't. I mean, he's still very much paralyzed and he can't I can't imagine barring a true miracle.
Paralyzed on a certain parts of his body?
He can't he can't move as much of his left side. He can walk with he can walk short distances with a cane, but it's like a robotic walk. It's not like a regular walk, and he can't move much of his arm except for maybe a little bit of some fingers on his left arm. And he can't, his speech his speech is basically normal, but he has so much medication in him that he doesn't he doesn't react normally. He's like sounds like he's tired all the time. I mean,
His mind cognitively, his mind is there. It's fully
yes, I mean it is and it isn't. I mean, he was a brilliant man. I mean,
Yeah, you told me he was like a CEO of the company, right?
yes, he was, and not just a normal CEO. He is brilliant. I mean, a brilliant guy. So he can't think the way he used to. I mean, there are spurts. There are times when he comes out with things, but other times he doesn't know what time it is. He's lost. His part of his brain. It's very sad. Very sad.
That was a company that he started.
No, no, no. But it was a small, relatively. It was a New York Stock Exchange company. It was a very significant company. Yeah. Anyway, it's sad, but he's still alive, and it's much better than it could have been.
Right.
Yeah.
It's good to be able to see them.
Yeah. Yeah. I had another friend, my best friend from college, called me a week or so ago, at like 9 o'clock at night, saying, "I'm going in tomorrow for surgery for a brain tumor."
Oh.
He's had the surgery. He doesn't have the pathology report back yet. He's in recovery, but that's scary too.
So maybe we could mention his name. So when we learn, we'll
Yeah.
about his recovery.
Yes, he's Ben Chaim Ben Yehudit.
Chaim Ben Yehudit. So we'll think for his recovery.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Ron.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Andy. Hi, Alberto. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Hi, Dr. Schluper.
Hello, Rabbi.
How are you?
It's good.
I don't know. I'm sorry, Alberto. I didn't call you also Dr. Alberto.
I didn't even notice.
I didn't even know. Alberto was my name in Italy, in Italian. So I like to say Alberto, I'm really comfortable with that name. That's how people used to call me in Italy, so it brings memory when I say your name. So we get together for time of uplifting, inspiration, unity, and especially when we learn from Torah as God's wisdom, so we're connecting with God. Because during this time, when we connect with God, we have a support that it's beyond us. You know, sometimes we think about what we're going through, but then when we have the Torah, it gives us strength. So first of all, let's make l'chaim to everyone here in the class. Only for good things. And we're getting close to the new year, which is we just entered the last month of the year, which is the month of Elul, which is we'll learn is a very powerful month. It's the last month of the Jewish calendar. It's where within the 30 days of the Rosh Hashanah and the high holiday. So this is a very powerful time. So we want to wish each other already. We could wish each other a good year. A year, you know, different than 2020, what it was, because it says that when it changes the new year, it changes the mazel, changes the, so we can use the change for what we're going through. So l'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
Yeah.
Okay, before we start, anybody wants to share something? Indy, you want to do that?
Well, I think, you know, what you said about changes for the new year. I think, you know, maybe this year was important with COVID, that it helped us change. So maybe we all needed a little push. And next year will be the rewards of that push, of that struggle. So I'm looking forward to the new year.
Yeah. It's very true what you say. Everything that happens is for a reason, and sometimes it's beyond us. Obviously, for those people that they are sick and they lost the loved ones, it's very painful. But obviously, we all got affected by this and put life in perspective, which the appreciation of the things that we have in life. Now put things in the perspective, the things that we used to do freely, and we can't do it as much as before. Now we appreciate those things. Instead of looking at what we need more, we count our blessings and we have gratitude of the things that we do have.
I think that's where faith comes in, you know, that you have to have faith that what you've been through, even though we don't know why sometimes, that it was for a reason. And a good reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that faith, the prayer in the morning goes into that faith and gratitude. Mm-hmm. Ed Schluper asked me this morning, we were talking about a book called Miracle Morning. Somebody that researched the successful people in the world and what they do in the morning. They have a certain routine. And he came up with I believe 6 or 7 things. And one of the things that they do in the morning, besides a little bit of meditation, they do gratitude. Because it's very hard because we all go through something. And our mind will focus on the negativity. But when we start focusing on the gratitude, that's how we can stay positive. And we stay energized and so on. That's the prayer in the morning is all about gratitude. It's a beautiful prayer. When you wake up, it says, Ode ani lefanecha, which I thank God for waking up and restoring my life, because it says in Judaism that when we wake up, it's actually our life, which is the soul. The source of life is our soul, gets returned to us. A part of it is going to get recharged and it's removed from our body, and part of it stays. That's why we are still alive, but we're not fully alive. And we wake up, our soul returns back. So we don't know this phenomena. We don't feel this phenomena, but it's a great phenomena. And that's why we thank God for restoring back our soul, which is the source of life. So, and that's what the prayer goes, Modeh ani lefanecha, we have gratitude because of that.
Right.
So those are the one of the things that in miracle, in morning miracles, in that book, it says about gratitude, but we do it with the prayers in the morning. You might hear a lot of ambulance because I'm by my mother here, and the apartment is by Ocean Parkway. So
Oh,
let's hear some noise.
welcome to New York.
Welcome to, that's right. Just in case you miss the sirens and the noise of New York, you can. Okay, so before we get into the class, I wanted to give you two introductions, and then we get into a class. First introduction is we're in the month of Elul. The month of Elul is the last month of the year, and it's considered the day of accounting. Like, you know, December, usually December is the last month before the tax year. So usually after that year, people make a calculation which taxes they have to pay, which one was a good investment, which one wasn't a good investment. So it's interesting that this month, the last month of this year, 5780, the Jewish calendar, it's considered the month of accounting. What does it mean, month of accounting? It's really, we reflect on the things the past year, on the things that we could improve on, the things that we spend a lot of time, but it really wasn't the right investment of, you know, personal improvement, family improvement, things like that. And we focus on things that we could improve more. So that's why it's considered the month of accounting. Accounting, not fiscal accounting, but it's more like preparation for the new year. And that's how we prepare ourselves for the high holiday, Rosh Hashanah, and so on. It's interesting that the month of Elul, it's spelled in Hebrew, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, which when you read it backwards, you read it loy, loy, lo, lo. Lo with an Aleph means no. And lo with the Vav, it sounds the same, means what is for you. So in the month of Elul, we think about the things that is no, they're not, we shouldn't focus so much and put efforts anymore. And which things that we need to focus, which one is for you and which one is no. So basically this is just an interesting thing in connection to the month of Elul. So we'll talk more about this month. There is a great book written by Simon Jacobson. He wrote a book called Towards a Meaningful Life. If anybody here read this book, Towards a Meaningful Life?
I read a portion of it.
Yeah. So it's a very, very interesting book that goes through many aspects of life. You know, old age, marriage, children, family, many mourning, and he explains them from a Jewish Kabbalistic perspective. Very, very nice book to read. And he wrote a book also, 60 Days. So 60 days is like 60 days from the month of Elul, including the month of the next month, the holiday. So he explains every day a certain preparation. So he has a certain WhatsApp group that if you're interested to go on it, send me the link. He sends like an interesting message for the day. So it's called a 60-day meditation book. So that's one thing. A second thing that I wanted to say today, it's a special day because it's the yahrzeit of a special rabbi that his name was Zera Shimshon. Zera Shimshon was a Kabbalist that lived in Italy, and he's buried in the city of Reggio Emilia. I don't know if you know Italy, but he lived in the 16th century. And it's interesting that his books are very interconnected with Kabbalah and Torah, and I'll explain in this class today what does it mean Kabbalah, Torah, and the different, but a lot of mysticism connecting with the Bible and all this. And he didn't have children. And he said, whoever will be learning from my books will be blessed either to get married, to find their spouse and they get married, or to have children. And there's many, many different interesting stories. My actually gives a weekly audio class from Zera Shimshon, and she tells a lot of people to learn about this rabbi, and you're going to see blessing, because he said that because I didn't have children, whoever learns from my books is considered like my child, and will see many, many blessings. So it becomes like an interesting thing to learn from his books, but people have seen many, many different miracles from learning from his books. So being that it's such a special day, this yard side, I will take one small thing that he said. I will share a learning from him, from Zera Shimshon. From Zera Shimshon, he says on last week's Torah portion, hi Robin, that the location where the Holy Temple is, it doesn't say that the Holy Temple will be built in Jerusalem. It doesn't give a site. It actually says, there will be my dwelling place. It says there. It doesn't say Jerusalem. It doesn't say by the Kotel. So the Zera Shimshon asks in his book, why doesn't it say the location? After all, we need to be very clear in the Torah. If not, people will say, oh, maybe God meant this place, or maybe this mountain, and so on. So the Zera Shimshon, this rabbi, explains that because he knew that when the Jews will enter Israel, and that location will be desolate for many, many years, 400 years, because they didn't build the Holy Temple right away in Jerusalem. They built it they had a small tabernacle in Givon and Nov, in different places, until 400 years later they built it in the Jerusalem. So if for those 400 years, that location would be desolate, and that location would be such a holy location, it will not be respectful for that place. So God mentioned there because the tabernacle will be in different places, but eventually will be in Jerusalem, but they will not recognize at that place as, oh, we're not giving enough respect to that place because they don't know yet where that location is going to be. That's what the Zera Shimshon says. There is another answer, interesting answer, based on the Rebbe's teaching, that the Torah doesn't give a location because Hashem knew that the Holy Temple will be destroyed. And when the Holy Temple will be destroyed, where will it be, the abode, the home of God's dwelling, the divine dwelling? Actually will be over there. Every place where you let God in, where you do a mitzvah in your own home, that becomes the place of Hashem. And that's why he says over there, because it's not specific in a geographical, just Jerusalem. Obviously, Jerusalem is the holy place, but this is just another interesting perspective. Okay, so let's get to the juice of the class. Today, this class in general is about what things that we're looking or either in improving or understanding different aspects. So I was asked about different terminology that I use in the class that were not too familiar. You know, we say the Kabbalah, I said the Talmud, I say the Chumash. What are we talking about, you know? So this is going to be a little bit of a class of, maybe you're familiar with these things, but it's a very interesting class because it's a very fundamental class that gives you like how the Torah was given, what are the different aspects of the Torah, and how do we know that the rabbis that they passed the Torah is really true. Maybe they made it up, things like that. Okay, so we're going to build it up slowly. We could take this class for the next few weeks. If you're interested, we'll, at the end of the class, we'll find out if you're interested to go deeper into this subject, we could, but I'm going to give you just a general intro today. Okay? Okay, so let me open up here. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. 1 second. So you can share. 1 second. Oh yeah, okay. So you could see what I'm seeing, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're gonna start this. Okay. This is like, I took different parts from different classes that I gave in the beginning, but just for just a little introduction, let's discuss this this question. I want you to think about a law from the Torah. The Torah means the Bible, a law from rabbinic, and also a custom. You know, you hear about customs, you know. So just let's brainstorm together. Anybody can give me any law from the Bible, from the Torah?
Wrap to fill in.
Okay, very good. Wrap the film or putting on the mezuzah on the door of the house for protection, which is a very good thing to check your mezuzah on the month of Elul. So that is part of the Bible. It says in the Torah, very good. Let's give an example of rabbinic law. Anybody can think of something?
Wearing a kippah?
Wearing a kippah, yeah, you're right. It
I
doesn't
can
say
hear
in
it.
the Torah, but it's actually more of a custom. It's more of a custom than rabbinic law. But okay, let's think. Okay, let's say Hanukkah, lighting Hanukkah candles. Hanukkah wasn't in the time of the Torah, but it happened much later because we know the story with the Greeks and all that. So they instituted the lighting of the candles of Hanukkah, but it's really a rabbinic law. It's not written in the Bible, but the rabbis instituted the holiday of the Hanukkah, and one of the mitzvot of the law is to light the candles of Hanukkah. A custom, we mentioned like wearing a kippah, that it's a custom, and in many, many different countries, I know in the Arab countries, they didn't wear a kippah, very religious people, they didn't wear a kippah, they wear a kippah when they enter in the synagogue. Most people in Russia didn't wear a kippah outside and so on. But let's think about another custom. Any other custom comes to mind?
The various like minhags for Passover, like Sephardics eat rice and other grain.
Very good. Okay, so that's a good example. The Sephardic eat rice. Ashkenazic don't eat rice. Some Ashkenazim don't eat certain type of beans. Some Ashkenazim use for charos, you know, the karpas. Some people use potatoes, some people use onions, some people use celery. For the maror, some people use horseradish, some people use romaine letters. What are all this? These are customs, right?
Beeswax. What about
Different customs.
beeswax?
What?
When you use
Could you hear me?
beeswax candles?
What?
When you use beeswax candles? in the Hanukkah
Oh,
candles?
yeah, that's also, you can consider that a custom also, right? So beeswax candles, things like that. Yeah. So we have a general idea what is the Torah, rabbinic, and this. Now the question is, where did the custom come from? Is that something that people start making different customs? Is there room for custom? Is there room for rabbinic law and so on? And so on. So let's understand this a little bit better. I just want to go to a slide. Do you see the slide or is not that clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
The slide.
Let me 1 second. Let me get into a different slide here, and then I'm going to come back to this. Okay. Okay. Oh no, 1 second. I went to the wrong one. 1 second. Okay. So, 1 second. I'm sorry. Oh, here, this one. Going back to the first one. Okay. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's going back to the first PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to give you the Torah. We're talking about Jewish calendar year, so it's easier. Okay. So when the Torah was given, we know that there is the oral Torah and the written Torah. Now you're going to ask me a question. How do we know that? Why didn't God give all the oral information in a written format? That's the thing we could discuss in a different time. But you know, God gave us the written Torah. And what is the written Torah? It's what we call it is the Chumash. The Chumash, the 5 books of Moses. And there are some other parts of the Chumash, which is the written Torah, that is part of the written Torah. Along with the written Torah, in the year 2448, this was a year 40 years after the exodus of Egypt. That's when the revelation of Mount Sinai happened. That's when God gave the 10 commandments. But that is also the time when God gave the 5 books of Moses. It's not from Moses. They are from God. They were just given to Moses to give it to us. That's why they called 5 books of Moses. But that's when the Torah was given and was taught to Moses. When Moses went up to Mount Sinai, God gave the information, and God gave also the oral information. The oral information is something that was given also in the same year, in the year 2448. So again, we have the written Torah and we have the oral Torah. The written Torah is not just the 10 commandments, but the 5 books of Moses. Actually, the 5th book is a summary that Moses wrote, but it also comes from God. The 5 books of Moses, what we call it, it's the written Torah. The oral Torah is what was transmitted orally. So now, and everything was given in the year 2448. Now let me go out of this slide to understand this better. 1 second, please. I want to go into a different. Okay, I want to go into this slide. So again, to recap this, I just want to give you this. Okay, you see this, okay, this written, okay. You see the slide, the Torah, the Bible written in which year?
Yes.
2448, yeah?
Yep.
Now, along with the written Torah was given, what else was given?
Oral Torah.
The oral Torah. So what is part of the oral Torah? The Medrash. The Medrash are different stories that were part of the written Torah, but it's called the allegorical. It's the Midrash. It's an extra story. They're not part of the written Torah, but they're part of the story that came along. So that's called the Medrash. So sometimes I will quote, I'm sorry, the Medrash. Sometimes I will quote the Talmud. The Talmud generally is the Gemara, and we'll have a text that will read it. I'm just giving you now a general intro, but the Talmud is what you know, the Gemara is the oral information was written in the by the 70 of the Common Era. But this is the oral information that was given before the Jews would go to exile. This originally was given at Mount Sinai, all the oral information, but the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was a rabbi of the nation, decided that if he's not going to write this information will be lost. Because all the information was given from the year 2448, and then was the Roman, they destroyed the temple, and the Roman brought the Jews into exile, and he saw that the Jews going to disperse all over the world, and if he's not going to write the oral information in the Talmud, all this oral information, which is really an explanation of the Bible, because the Bible was written in a very concentrated format to know how to do different mitzvot. For example, we said tefillin. How do we know that tefillin is a black box with a strap, with this parchment, and where do we have to put it? All this was given orally, but all this oral information will be lost, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi felt, because the Jews will go to exile. So then he decided to write this oral information in the Talmud. And actually, God wanted to be orally, and he actually made it, he went against God's will. There is a reason why God wanted to have it orally, but he did it for the benefit of the Jewish people. And that's why he wrote the oral information. There's an interesting metaphor to this, just for you to understand this better, about a person that is planting a tree in his backyard, and the gardener comes, he says, you see my tree, I'm trying to plant it, and he goes and he's growing like the Tower of Pisa, you know, a little bit planted, I'm trying to make it straight and so on, I have a problem. But he said, I don't understand. When you go, you see all the trees growing straight, and they don't have a problem of growing like diagonal, a little bit slanted and all this. And here I'm just planting one tree and it's growing slanted and so on. So he said, you see, you have to understand that in the forest, you have a lot of trees. So each tree supports each other. So they all grow straight somehow because they all have a certain support because of they're all growing next to each other. But when you're growing one tree in your backyard, it doesn't have support, so you have to put a stick, you have to make sure it goes straight and so on. It's just a metaphor for us to understand how Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi taught. He says, when the Jews were in a community, it was very centralized. The Jews were Israel. Even when they went to Babylonia, but they just went to Babylonia. They didn't go everywhere. So then they're like the trees in the forest, that they're going to grow straight because there is a support system and so on. But when the tree is by itself not in the forest, doesn't have that community support, then you need that direction, then you need that support. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi saw that the exile of the Roman is going to be where the Jews going to be dispersed over the world. That's what happened really. So that's why he needs to write this oral information as a support for the Jewish people not to lose that information. Let me finish with the slide. I'm sure there are some questions here. Then we have part of the oral information is the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is the mysticism, and I will mention a lot Kabbalah. The Kabbalah was written in the 3800. So it's about 1400 years after the Torah was given. The Kabbalah was given on Mount Sinai, but again, orally. But who wrote the information in a book called the Zohar is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a great Talmudic. When I say Talmudic rabbi, it means somebody that lived in this period, the Talmud period. So he was a great Talmudic rabbi, and he wrote the Kabbalah, which is the mysticism, which is the spiritual aspect of the Torah. Why do we do certain mitzvot? The energy behind the mitzvot, the energy behind creation, why God created the world, and all this mystical aspect. So all these are written in the Kabbalah. Obviously, later on, this Kabbalah was very, very secretive, only to certain people. Then the Arizal, in the century, he kind of discovered that, he took it, and then Baal Shem Tov, and that through the teaching of Hasidism. That's what Chabad learned, the Hasidism Tanya. The Tanya is all based on Kabbalah, which is the mystical aspect of the Torah. And then we have, after the Talmud, we have the Mishnah. Actually, the Mishnah is part of the Talmud. The Mishnah came before the Talmud. You see, the rabbi that I mentioned before, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he saw that the Jews going to be dispersed, he collected all the information from all different rabbis that was transmitted orally, and he wrote in a very concentrated way the Mishnah in the year 3948. He wrote the Mishnah. So a few generations later, they were trying to figure out why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote in the Mishnah in a very concentrated way. So it came the Talmud. The Talmud is another word for the Talmud is the Gemara. The Gemara discusses at length every word of the Mishnah, this opinion, that opinion. It's like very, sometimes very legal, very like attorney mind, going back and forth, like in a court system, going back and forth and figure out what is the conclusion. That is the Talmud. There are people that they learn Talmud all their life. The Talmud is very vast. It's like 80 volumes in the Talmud. They talk about, let's say, one mitzvah, for example, of the sukkah. There is a whole track of Talmud about a sukkah, how it has to be done and all that and so on. It reminds me of a joke about this. It was funny, this Jewish comedian, he said, you know why the Jews don't celebrate Christmas? Because if they will celebrate Christmas, there will be a whole track on the Talmud, how tall the tree has to be, and what kind of lights have to be, and how you have to light the candles. And it's gonna be very good. So there's no we don't celebrate Christmas because there's no. But basically, the Talmud is very, very detailed and takes things apart. Like in the yeshiva, people that they learn Talmud is very mind stimulated. I actually try to learn every day 2 pages of Talmud, which is called the Daf Hayomi. There is a learning of a Talmud every day, but it's very, very interesting and it's very stimulating in the mind, very like interesting also because it goes through the mitzvot and explains the mitzvot. But that's the Talmud. The Talmud, the Gemara is the same name for that, but the Mishnah is part of the Talmud. The Talmud comes means the Mishnah. So the Mishnah came first, and then the Talmud came after. Okay, this is like this slide. Now, I'm going to explain this slide a little bit better with the timer, with the time, and with the text. But before we move on, is there any question on what we said so far?
Where did the Tanya come in? You said it's part of the Kabbalah?
Yeah, the Tanya is part of the Kabbalah. Midrash, Talmud, Kabbalah, it's all part of the oral Torah. This is the oral Torah was given in the year 2448. It was given orally and was transmitted from generation to generation to generation until one point, different rabbi decided to write it down. Now, you might ask me, how do we know that we don't have the problem of the telephone? You know, the telephone game.
Yes.
You pass down the information and until the end of the group, and then you come with a new sentence. How do we know that the oral information is the real information? Maybe it has a problem, the information got distorted and so on. So if this question bothers you, we can address it next week because it's the whole explanation. We're not going to have the time to, but this is a question we could discuss in the future. But the Medrash, the Talmud and Kabbalah, Mishnah is all part of the oral Torah. And all this was given in the year 2448 orally. And the written Torah was given in a written format. What's the question?
Yeah, Rabbi, in Mount Sinai, we received the Torah in the form of the Chumash. The Chumash itself was given.
God, okay, the Gemara says dictated to Moshe the Chumash.
So
and there is a question how it dictated. If it dictated all in one shot, but most opinion is it dictated as things happen. It means if some stories happen after the revelation, then God dictated to Moshe. That's your question you had?
yeah, so it was added throughout the events.
Yes.
I have a question. The Midrash, the Mishnah, and the Talmud and the Gemara all are 4 different terms to describe aspects of the oral Torah. Midrash, Talmud, Mishnah, and Gemara.
Correct.
It is part of, part of the oral Torah. What are the differences? I mean, I don't know, a sentence or so about each one to differentiate it, because they are all oral Torah, but why do we need 4 different instruments, Mishnah, Gemara, Talmud, and Midrash?
Very good.
One has some
Very
attribute.
good. Okay, let's go into a different text to understand this. Okay, let me go into a different text, okay? One second. Okay, do you see what I'm seeing here now, a PDF?
Yeah, glossary.
Okay, yeah, let's take some turns and to read certain part. This is going to explain, is going to address your question. So let's read this text. Let's take turns each one. Who wants to volunteer first?
I can.
Oh,
Torah comes from the word meaning teaching or lesson. It is usually used to refer to the entire body of traditional Jewish scholarship, all the way from the 5 books of Moses down to the scholarly responsa of today's rabbis. It is sometimes used to refer to the 5 books of Moses. It can be determined from context which one is meant. You can assume that when you hear the word Torah, it is being used in the more general sense, unless the context tells you differently. When referring to the 5 books of Moses, people often say Chumash or written Torah or Bible, although the latter 2 are sometimes used interchangeably. The term Old Testament is not valid from the Jewish point of view, since it implies that there is a valid New Testament, which Judaism, of course, does not accept.
Okay. So when we say the Torah, it means lessons, teaching. But really, what it means when I say in the class, in the Torah it says, what does it mean, Torah?
The Chumash, the 5 books of Moses.
Right. The Chumash, the written Torah, is whatever we read on Shabbat, and the 5 books of Moses, that's the Torah. Okay. We got that. Okay, let's go to the, okay, Chumash. It's similar to the first one, but the word Chumash that we use, we have the book Chumash, comes from the word 5, the 5 books of Moses from the word Chamesh, which means 5. Okay, anybody else wants to read written Torah?
All right, I will. The entire set of the 24 books of the Bible, it is called in Hebrew Tanakh, which is an acronym for Torah, here meaning the 5 books of Moses. Nevi'im, the prophets such as Isaiah, and Ketuvim, the writings such as Psalms. A list of the 24 books is found in the reference material section of this lesson.
Okay, so I didn't want to complicate the things because I wanted to keep it simple. But if you heard the word Tanakh. Tanakh stands for, like here it says in an acronym, Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im, which are the prophets. There are many prophets after Joshua, Moses and Joshua. There was a period of prophets, and the prophets had prophecies, and there were many books, and those books they were considered part of the written Torah. They don't have the type of holiness of the 5 books of Moses because they're the word that there was a certain prophecy, but it's like very historic, but it's also many prophecies, but it's the things that happened during that period. But they take part of the written Torah, and the Ketuvim, which came after, which is written by King David, King Solomon, and so on, are also the part of the written Torah, which technically is 24 books. They have different type of level of holiness because the 5 books of Moses were dictated by God versus the other ones, but they're also the words of God through the prophet. That makes sense?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Indy, you want to continue? Halacha.
Halacha, Jewish law and practice. It comes from the word halach, which means to go or to walk. This refers to going or walking in the path of divinely ordained conduct. In general, it refers to the entire range of works and decisions of Jewish law. If someone had asked what is the halach, he is trying to determine the conclusion of Jewish law about the issue at hand. The plural form is halachot.
Okay, so this is a very common word also used. What is the halakha? Halakha means, well, what is the law? What should we do? Let's say, how do we put the mezuzah? On the right side of the door, on the left side? So we will ask, what is the halakha? What is the instruction? Just basically, there is a book called a manual of halakha, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's a manual of halakha, how to do certain mitzvah. Basically, the halakha will tell you, just cut and dry the information, how to do the mitzvah. But that's basically the Jewish law. Okay, so let's go. Okay, let's continue. Mitzvot. Anybody else?
Okay, plural of mitzvah, the commandments, not just good deeds, also pronounced mitzvot. Halacha describes how to perform the mitzvot.
Okay, so mitzvah, it's the commandment, which is the halacha explains how to do a mitzvah. Okay, go on.
Okay, the oral Torah. All of Torah except for the written Torah, although originally passed down in oral form, it was written down in later generations. The best known work of the oral Torah is the Talmud.
Okay, so now you had a question. What's the difference between the Talmud, the Midrash, and the Kabbalah? Why is referring, even though they're all 3 different aspect completely. So let's try to figure that out. Let's read Talmud.
Mhm. The main work of the oral Torah, consisting of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Definitions of Mishnah, Gemara, and other useful terms can be found in the additional glossary in the reference material section of this lesson.
Okay, but its problem is we don't have this here. Okay. Okay, so let me explain, let me answer you like this.
Yeah.
Just to make it, just to understand the difference. They are all given orally, but they have different focus. The Talmud is really explaining the mitzvot of the written Torah in a legal aspect. Like the law, the halacha, derives from the Talmud. So how do we know how to do different things? We say, oh, look at the halacha, the Jewish law. Where do we get the Jewish law from? It's from the Talmud. Okay, so the Talmud really elaborates on how to perform certain things with the information that was given orally from generation to generation, and then was written down. So the Jews that will go into exile will have a text, will have a manual how to perform certain things. The law, halacha, wasn't there yet because everybody knew how to do things because it was transmitted orally. Once Rabbi Yehuda Nasi saw that the Jews will be going into exile and they will know how to do things, he wrote that Talmud so the people will have that information, and the halacha is based on the Talmud, is derived from the Talmud. The Kabbalah is totally a different thing. Kabbalah is mysticism. Kabbalah is the spiritual aspect of the mitzvot. That means the Talmud will tell you how to do things, how to do a tefillin. The Kabbalah will tell you why we do tefillin. What do we accomplish when we do tefillin? What kind of energy? What do we accomplish in our, as a people? We connect our heart and mind spiritually and all that. That's what the Kabbalah goes. The Kabbalah goes on a deeper aspect of not how to do something, but the why of doing something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The Medrash, you know what, let's leave the Medrash for now. The Medrash is more like the added story that is not written in the Torah. So let's say it says that that Abraham was 75 when he left. So how do we know about that Abraham smashed the idols and he was thrown in the furnace? It doesn't say in the Torah, but it says in the Medrash. So that means the Torah just picked certain incidents that are important, but the Medrash fills in the gap to those stories. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here I put a list of the 24 books of the, what we call it, the Tanakh, the Chumash, prophets, the holy writings. Those are 24 books. Okay, that's why I put it. Now, here we have a list. We don't have to go into every name, but here we have a list of the generation of the leader, how the information was passed down from generation to generation until Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, that he decided to write the Torah. So generation is, we could go into weeks in explaining this, you know, but just on a nutshell, Moses received the Torah, he passed it to Joshua, then Pinchas, and then he passed the information down the line from generation to generation until this is the period of the prophets. And then there is a period from the prophets, the whatever, the different names for different periods, until I want to show you Rabbi, okay. You see Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, number 35. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he wrote the Mishnah. He collected the pieces for the Mishnah here. And then the Mishnah was very also concentrated.
The
The
Mishnah,
generation after, the Rabbi Rav Ashi. You see here Rav Ashi, he compiled the Gemara. That means he collected all the information and compiled the Gemara, the compilation of the Talmud through Rav Ashi, Ravina, and their disciple. So this is through the generations. If you want to look at this in a timeline, one second here, let me see. Have this in a timeline. Now let me go out from this one. Let me go here, one second, hold on a second. We'll get there. We'll get there, 1 second. Okay, this, I'm gonna open now a timeline so you can see how the, and also this timeline, it might take some time to, but this is the timeline. Okay, so you see in the timeline, we're talking about the Jewish calendar, 2448, the Torah was given. Not the oral Torah, not just the written Torah, but the oral Torah. But the oral Torah wasn't written yet. It was given in the year 2448. Then comes the period of, for 500 years, the period of the prophets. We mentioned the period of the prophets with the writings. Those are the 24 books. They were part of the 5 books plus the other books. It's a compilation of the Tanakh, which is this whole period. Okay, about 1,000 years. Then came the Mishnah, where I showed you Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi in the year 3948. He wrote the Mishnah. And we said that was very concentrated, so people need explanation. So then the Rav Ashi wrote the Talmud. So this is in the year 4260. So, okay. So this is part of the oral Torah. Then came, 1 second, then came different people that they wrote the halacha, they wrote the Torah law. They took the Talmud and they wrote a very simple manual without a lot of explanation, but just what to do. And that was the Rambam. The Rambam, the Maimonides, was the first one that wrote a book of halacha, of Jewish law. And then Rabbi Yosef Karo, 100 years ago, he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And then after him, there came different formats of Shulchan Aruch that were written. Here it doesn't bring the Kabbalah because it didn't bring it here in the history. But this just to give you a general timeline, how different books were written throughout the Jewish history.
can I ask you,
Sure.
what's the difference in content between the Talmud and the Shulchan Aruch? Both are related to law.
Okay, so the Talmud is more like the explanation and reasoning and where did they hear that from, what is the source of that, and why and how, very detailed. The manual, the Rambam, when he wrote the halacha, it's true that they deduct the information from the Talmud, but the halacha is just cut and dry. What do you have to do? No, without reasoning, without many, just like, it's like saying, giving you examples. Your wife, your wife gives you a shopping list. So she have to get like a seltzer, you have a list. The halacha is just a list. Tells you how to do different things. Now you're gonna ask, oh, why do we need the seltzer? Why shouldn't we have tonic water during this time? Isn't it better for some reason? No, maybe this better without sugar. All the reasoning is written in the Talmud. And your shopping list doesn't have all the reasoning. It just have the list of what have to be purchased, cut and dry. Halacha doesn't have a lot of the reasoning of the do things. It's just a manual. How to do it. Let's say, like a manual of how to fix your vacuum. The manual just tells you what to do. Do diagnostic, this, that. It doesn't explain you the mechanic of the vacuums or things like that. So the halacha just gives you the specifics. The Talmud gives you the reasoning, where it comes from, how to do it, the details, and so on. Many times, so that's why the Rambam, in order to write a book of Jewish law, he had to know the whole Talmud and the whole Bible memory, completely memory. And he created the bridge of creating just a codifying the law in a simple format. Because in the Talmud is all over, it's all mixed in all over. And people had to get the information from the Talmud. But at the time, everybody was very knowledgeable, but the Rambam wanted to make it very simple. And Rabbi Yosef Karo made it even more simple, to know exactly what to do. That's halacha.
Okay.
Okay, now we go. What time is it here? Oh, it's almost 8 o'clock. Okay, so, okay, you know what? We're gonna wrap up here. There's a lot to talk about this subject, but at least it gives you a certain clarity of when I say certain words, they're not just, and you know what? I excuse myself because I took it for granted. You know, sometimes I say, it says in the Talmud this, it says in the Medrash, it says in the Halacha.
Yeah.
And right now, today at least, you have a little bit of a reference, and I'll explain a little bit more. The Talmud, we're talking about this period of time. We're talking about 2,000 years ago. Mishnah, we're talking about 1,400 years ago. If I say, it says in the prophets, we're talking about at least 2,800 years ago. If we're talking about when something was written in the written Torah, it's about 3,300 years ago. So it gives you a time frame when the thing was written, when was it given. Now, I hope you could go to sleep tonight with the question of how do we know that the oral information that we have today is really real and the rabbi didn't make it up.
But I was just going to ask that.
And we then have the telephone problem, the telephone game problem, and maybe those, you know, the rabbi that were in the mood to give this explanation, you know, people say interpretation. Maybe the rabbi made this interpretation, this rabbi had this mood to give this interpretation, and we have to follow a rabbi interpretation. How do we know that this oral information, the Talmud and all this, is really the real information that was given from Sinai? Number one. Number two is many times we see difference of opinions. How you could have difference of opinions? Who was right? If somebody is right, the other person wrong. If the other rabbi is wrong, maybe the whole thing is wrong. So this is, I know it's a very powerful question. If this bothers you enough, we could have a second class, and we could have a third and fourth and fifth class on this topic, but we can have next week, we can discuss more about this specific question.
I know I would like it because I really was about to ask that same thing when you brought it up. So I'm definitely interested.
Okay, so now I know from you that you are interested to continue on this subject. Let me hear from anybody else is interested, so I will continue in this subject in the future.
I would like also to continue. until we tease it out. And when I hear you're saying the businesses or the Mara, it's familiar. I don't have to wonder.
Okay.
You can count me in too, Steve. I like this concept. I like these.
Okay. Okay, very good. So today was more historically, was more like information. Next week, there is a very interesting class that will address the two questions that we spoke in about this, and you will really enjoy the class to see how the Torah was real. Why was the Torah was given orally? Why was it given written? Doesn't God know the problem of oral that will have a telephone problem? Why gave it orally? Couldn't he give everything written? Anyway, will be written in the future. So all these questions, we'll address them next week, God willing.
Great.
Okay.
The Chabad is the Kabbalah strictly Chabad?
No.
No. So but the
Kabbalah-
Tanya is, right?
Yeah, Tanya is more Chabad, but there are many books of Kabbalah that different people have written, and not just Chabad, but the Kabbalah is considered the Zohar. The Zohar is a book that, you know, a lot of people didn't learn it for years. You know, there was like restriction to learn it before 40 years old and so on. And then, you know, the Kabbalah became very famous with the Kabbalah Center and all this, you know, with the whole Madonna movement and all that. But the Kabbalah was the secret information that was passed down from generation to generation, only from teacher and student, and was very, very, was very limited to only certain group. Until the Kabbalah in the last 200 years, with the teaching of Hasidism and the Tanya and other things, was more spread out to everybody, so everybody can understand it. But for 2,500 years, the Kabbalah was just very secretive. It was just a knowledge. It was very secret to just a small group of people in the Jewish community.
So the Tanya is the Chabad understanding of it?
That's right. You could say that.
Okay.
You could, yeah. Basically, the Tanya takes different aspects of Kabbalah, certain aspects of Kabbalah, and brings them down that everybody can understand them, because the Kabbalah was very, very hard to understand. It's almost like very cryptic. If you read the Zohar, which talks about creation, which talks about the soul, is very cryptic. So the Tanya took that information, extracted that information, he wrote it in a format that everybody can understand it with their knowledge.
So the Zohar is the Chabad, that is the Kabbalah.
In the future, we could bring different examples of the Kabbalah, the Zohar, which is the foundation of Kabbalah. Zohar is the foundation of Kabbalah. And you could say the Tanya is it takes the explanation of the Zohar, yes.
Okay.
Could it be that with all the history, it gives the downfall of each generation? That generation had the explanation of the previous generation, and the following generation had to have more explanation of the previous generation, until it has to be down and simple to us.
Yeah.
I vote for that.
So next week, looking forward to explain you a little bit more further about this, how the oral, why did we need the oral? Why couldn't it be written? How do we know that the oral information is real? It's not just an interpretation. How do we know that why there are difference of opinions? Where did it come from? And so on.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great week.
Okay, have a good week, everybody.
Too.
Thank
It
you.
was good chatting to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Shalom. Bye-bye, be well.